I think everyone's aware that work has changed quite a bit. If you're not aware, I hope that after today's talk, you'll understand why. Um, and things have changed since 2022. Like ever since ChatGPT came out, we've been on this journey of change. And and yeah, like ChatGPT was the first instance of generalized artificial intelligence, right? Where you had a model that could be useful for a broad range of tasks. And this has continued to improve over the last 3+ years. Um, and I will go through this timeline a bit. So back in 2022, 2023, the types of things you could do with it are code completion, right? Where, at least in the software engineering world, this was super useful, right? One of the first products was GitHub Copilot. Use this really frequently. It helped me write code way faster. But, ChatGPT, I think, also became a replacement for Google for a lot of people. And that, happened over, I would say, this time period, November 2022 to December 2023. In 2024, these things called agent frameworks came out. One of the more popular ones was called LangGraph. This was a time where you could build your own agents using these open source libraries like LangGraph. These coding IDEs, called like Cursor was the first one where it was different than um, Copilot, which was just code completion. This allowed you to then just chat with your code. You could do tasks like, okay, help me write some unit tests for this. You could do Q&A over your whole code base, right? So it was really useful. Another product was called Windsurf, that was similar to this. 2025 was a big one. These tools called coding agents came out. The most popular one was called Claude Code. And the thing that made this different was a few things. Was it lived on a user's machine, right? So it could access your files and whatever permissions you have. And it also had a lot of tools. So let me just switch to this diagram. So I've used this diagram in a couple of my presentations, but I'll just go through this real quick. So this box is an agent, and in this agent, you have a model and you have tools. This is ChatGPT today, right? You have a model like GPT 5.4, 5.3, and then you have tools that the agent has access to, right? If you use ChatGPT, sometimes it does searches, right? So it's using a search tool. Sometimes it writes code to maybe do math, or if you're asking to build an application, it's going to write some code. So it has a coding tool. Um, it also has an image generation tool, right? If you ask it to generate images. When I was talking about the agent frameworks like LangGraph, this was 2023, 2024, you could create your own agents, right? So you don't have to rely on agents that are provided by these labs, but you can create your own. This is just a simple example. I define my agent using a model, could be any LLM, closed or open source. I can create tools. This is a fetch data tool. I bind it to my agent or I bind it to my LLM. And at runtime, I can then just query it saying, oh, hey, how are my sales? This query will go into my agent. The model will decide, okay, do I have a tool that, do I have a tool available that will help me answer this question? Yes, I do. I have a fetch data tool. I'm going to call this tool. It's going to query some database for me, and this data is going to be sent back to the model, and the agent can answer your question, right? And this pattern is really useful. Like a lot of companies are doing this now. Whenever a company has their own agent, they're likely building something like this, right? That's obviously a lot more complicated, but generally it's this, right? You have a model, you have some tools. These models can use the tools well, and you can create useful agents like this. Claude Code is different though. Claude Code and other coding agents like Codex, uh, you still have an agent, but you no longer have to create as many custom tools, right? The coding agents like Claude Code, they come with tools like a bash tool, these coding tools, read, edit, write, uh, search file tool like called grep. And because it has access to a bash tool, this automatically gives it access to thousands of tools just out of the box. Because bash, if you're not familiar with it, it's a scripting language, but also a way to run these command line utilities. Uh, and over the last 50 years, there's literally tens of thousands of these that are available. And all of these tools are in the training data, right? So the models know how to use these tools. And even if it's a new tool, even if it's a new tool that was made in the last year or you made a new tool, Claude Code can just read the documentation and use it. So I think this is a big change because once the models cross the threshold to be able to use tools well, it's called tool use, and they could reason over it, they could decide which tools to use, right? Then you can have these really interesting loops, right? The same use case here. I have a question about my data, how are my sales? And I no longer have to create any custom tools, right? If my data is in a database, that database probably has some API or command line interface into that database. In this case, my data is in BigQuery. There's a BigQuery CLI, and my query then can just be routed to the agent. The agent will use the bash tool. It'll write some code to query the BigQuery CLI, and it can just do anything. It can agentically explore the tables. It can write the SQL. It can query the outputs, or run the SQL and look at the query output. And then the same thing happens, right? The data is sent back to the LLM, and the agent can answer your question. So this is all happening quite a bit. Um, there's this article today in the Wall Street Journal that actually talks about this, like 3 reasons AI is now more reliable than ever. And I mean, yeah, it's just real quick. The 3 reasons are AI now know more and can look up what they don't, right? So the models are becoming more intelligent. Are becoming, they have more knowledge within them, like in the weights and the way that the models are trained, but they can also, look up or use these search tools to discover what they don't know. Another is they're growing adept at using tools. So I'm not going to talk a lot about tool use, but yeah, in general, this is what makes these agents really, really productive, right? They can use applications, um, that we use all the time, like Excel or Slack or Jira or any sort of application. If there is a programmatic way to use that tool, I think that AI agents are going to be able to use that tool better than a person in general. And then, yeah, AIs now can check their own work. Let me admit these people. It's gonna put this over here. So yeah, the AIs now can check their own work and each other's. Um, yeah, this is used a lot to, you know, AI reviewing its own code or its own work, um, creating these validation loops so that AI can do this effectively. And going back to this, and then this year, there's been some changes too. So I think the big change was OpenClaw. So if you're not familiar with OpenClaw, it's this open source framework that I think is the most popular open source project ever on GitHub. Um, and it's basically giving you access to a coding agent, but with additional things, right? The additional things, are, it's always on. So, I have this running on my computer, like a computer that's sitting next to me, and that computer is always on. And I can send messages to this agent via multiple channels, like WhatsApp, Telegram, iMessage. I'm using Telegram to send messages to it, but so I can have it do things for me at any time, no matter where I am. And then there's these other things like heartbeats, where the agent on a periodic basis will do different things. Um, and this was an innovation that OpenClaw added. So yeah, these things uh, were first introduced in OpenClaw, but these features are slowly making their way into other coding agents like Claude Code and Codex. All right, let me see. All right, I want to switch over to this other diagram. A little bit complicated, but hopefully I can explain why. Um, so I'm calling this the agent stack, and I just want to talk through what this is. So this is like in my mind how I think about why these things have become useful and valuable. So at the very bottom, you have models. Um, and these columns represent different coding agents. So like the yellow represents Claude Code, blue represents Codex, and then the red rep or the pink represents OpenClaw or OpenClaw-like systems. And I've numbered the layers and I've described the layers. So we'll just go from the bottom to the top. So layer one is the model, right? At the base of all these systems is the same thing. It's some language model. And just keep in mind these language models, their capabilities are growing. Um, right? Opus 4.7 just came out yesterday, and I expect these models to continue to improve, over the next few years. I'm going to skip this one. Layer two is the agent runtime and the base harness. So this is what Claude Code and Codex are doing, where they have this agent runtime, which is, just like the loop that I was describing before, this thing where you have a tool calling loop essentially, and that's all that agent loop is doing. And then you also have these built-in tools that each harness has. So, um, so yeah, these tools are like the bash tool or the search tool or any of these tools that are sort of built in. I can actually show you a list. You just look this up. These are some of the tools that are built in. Uh, and this list is always growing too, right? These harnesses change very frequently. And right, so this is kind of new. Its ability to create crons or these scheduled tasks. This is relatively new, maybe in the last 3 months. This bash tool has always been around. Um, this ask user question tool is good because it will be triggered if the agent thinks it needs more information from you. So yeah, these are things that it's good to be aware of what they are and also understanding, okay, how do these things change over time? Layer three, I'm calling it harness engineering. I don't know if this is the best name for it, but this includes everything that happens after you have this coding agent on your computer. Like this is how you configure it, this is how you customize it. And so some of these things include memory, where these agents, if you start a new session with them, they're not going to remember anything that you've done with them. And so there's all these mechanisms for giving them the right information or context for the task at hand. And typically this is in an Agents.md or Claude.md. Um, these are files that live in uh, your project that give your agent instructions. Memory is something that's pretty new too. specific to Claude Code where it'll automatically save memories to a specific file, and these may be referenced in future sessions. And then you can have other documents, right? Other documents that describe plans or specifications for things you're trying to build. And then there are these things called brains um, that I've seen recently that people are creating these knowledge-based repositories to, you know, store all this information. Um, and what's interesting though is this all is um, these are all Markdown files, right? So maybe I'll show an example of this. Um, this is a skills marketplace from Sentry. So this is their Agents.md, and this is just a file that contains instructions for their agent, right? It's just language. It's not really code, and it's all human readable. And the fascinating thing is just how effective Markdown is in making your agents more useful. They're like unreasonably effective. Um, and and yeah, I'll talk more about the external brain maybe a little later for these applications. Skills is a new thing. Notably, skills are also MD files too. So what a skill is um, let me actually use a different example that maybe is more broadly applicable. So uh, let's use this one. So this is a plugin from Anthropic. A plugin is just a collection of skills and other functionality that you can use to improve your Claude code. I'm going to go into the design plugin. And in this design plugin, they have skills. And let's just say we look at, actually, I'm going to go to finance instead. Since taxes were due a couple days ago, we can look at, I don't know, financial statements. And this is a skill.md. So this is also a markdown file or a plain text file. And what this is doing is it's capturing a lot of information around how to do financial statement analysis. Um, right? There's examples, right, of what a generated income statement would look like. Something called variance analysis, which I'm actually not sure what it is. Um, and then, yeah, GAAP presentation requirements, some accounting things. So all of this, in theory, is actually in the weights of the model. So you may not need this, but skills are important because you're very specifically giving your agents knowledge that you want to be confident that they're going to follow these instructions. So, so yeah, these skills could become or could be just knowledge that they need to use, or they could be step-by-step steps to follow. Um, and then, yeah, there's other things like connectors. So if I go to my Codex app and I go to plugins here, these are things that are called connectors, right? This is giving your agent the ability to connect to all these other applications. So, for example, if you have Google Calendar, Gmail, Google Drive, if you connect this and you ask questions about your email, uh, you can then use Codex to do things with that email, right? You could have it read or, I don't know, organize, label, possibly summarize, or even respond in some cases to your email. So that's all possible because of these connectors and how they've been set up. And at the top, I just have this section called Agentic Knowledge Work. use cases. Um, and this is just examples of what I've seen, like what people are doing with these coding agents and what is possible. So just talking through some of them. Anthropic, they use Claude Code to build this application called Claude Cowork in 10 days. Um, it's pretty amazing to me. It's not a trivial application. It's an application that probably has, I don't know, hundreds of thousands or millions of users right now. But the speed at which they were able to build this is pretty phenomenal. The OpenAI team, they had this article called Harness Engineering where they talked about how they spent 5 months building and shipping an internal beta of a software product with 0 lines of manually written code. I found that to be pretty amazing. Um, and then, yeah, these OpenClaw, other projects that are similar, NanoClaw or Hermes Agent, these always-on agents, people are using them to create these personal assistants, these household managers. I saw a talk a couple days ago around agentic parenting and homeschooling, like using it to manage your school, which is really inspiring. I might try to do something with that too. But then any knowledge work task, right? I think I tried to diagram this a bit here where like what is possible now, right? So I think you can build prototypes of almost anything, like just immediately, whether it's UIs, any sort of data analysis, data engineering task, building apps, even building ML models, like this is all possible. Agentic workflows, right? You have all these things that are step-by-step processes, right? That you can now do with agents. So one example of this is in the software engineering space. One popular one is called compound engineering, right? This is uh, actually I'm going to use this other one from this person named Adi Osmani. So he's created these production grade engineering skills for AI coding agents, right? And these are all skills at the end of the day. They're all Markdown files, and these are all skills that you can use one off, or you can just chain together, right, to do something end to end, right? If you have some idea of an application you want to build, this collection of skills could be useful to, um, go through the whole software development lifecycle. Um, and yeah, like it's amazing how quickly these things can be created, how you can make them compatible with all these different coding agents. So yeah, that's the workflow example. I think I'll just hop down to agentic documentation too. This is something I've also learned a bit about. So there's something called a personal knowledge management system. It's like a PKM. And I've maintained one of these over the years. I used to use this tool called Workflowy. Um, right. I found this to be actually a really good tool. It's basically like unlimited or infinite bullet lists that you can use. Um, and I used this for about 10 years, but about 6 months ago, I switched to this tool called Obsidian. And Obsidian, at the end of the day, it's just an application that visualizes Markdown files. But because of how useful Markdown files are in AI and agents, it's become a tool that is so valuable. And what people have done is created these brain-like applications. Right? This is from Gary Tan. He has created this brain that um, it's like a system that manages information, right? So you have an architecture around, okay, people, projects, ideas, companies, meetings. And the cool thing about Obsidian is you can link these documents together, or you can kind of see this in this visualization here with these edges and nodes. And typically it's pretty painful to, you know, have to manually create these links, but AI can do this really well. And so what people are doing is they are creating these agent brains, right? Where I kind of like having the agent write its own Markdown files. I still maintain my own and I keep it separate, but this has also become really useful. Uh, Andre Karpathy also has a similar idea here. He calls it the LLM wiki, where, you know, to use this, you just copy this file into your coding agent, and the coding agent is going to follow these instructions and build this for you, right? So this is another pattern that's pretty interesting because, typically when you're using a new piece of software, you have to read the documentation, you have to learn how to use it. But nowadays, you can copy paste a lot of these instructions and get going, which is kind of cool. Um, all right, let's see if Mhm. Okay, I just wanted to demo one thing. So I will demo this thing I saw yesterday. This is from this guy named Jason Liu. Um, and he had this idea to create a small Codex chief of staff. Okay, so I'm going to demo this in Codex and like how easy this is. So in Codex, um, you can also do this in Claude Code, but I'm just going to create a new project. I'm just going to put it here, chief of staff. And I'm going to copy paste this. I want the raw text. Actually, let's try this. Oh, I've hit my usage limit, so I'm going to switch to Claude. Let me just make sure. Yeah, let's see if this works. This may not work because it's more Codex specific. Okay, so I want to focus on so I'm just going to respond with that. So it's creating the vault now. You can always click this to see what it's doing. Um, This is one reason I like Claude a little bit more for this case because you can actually see its thinking traces. In Codex and OpenAI models, they actually don't make the traces public, I think. So it's writing in Agents.md. Uh, in the apps now, they have these Markdown previewers, so it's really nice. You actually don't even need a separate, program to do this. So it's writing a README. It's writing a heartbeat prompt. Actually, don't know if the heartbeats will work in Claude Code. Yeah, so heartbeat generally runs really frequently, right? Every 15 minutes to stay on top of things. So it's going to try to run this and check recent stuff to get new context. I don't have this connected, so I don't think it's going to work, but you can see this as an example. So that's basically it. Like it finished in a couple minutes. And this is like what I mean by it's so easy to try things now because you no longer have to handwrite any of this stuff. Um, and yeah, I just find this to be, uh, I often have to pause and remember how amazing this is, that this is even possible right now. All right. A few things I want to also talk about are the mindset you need to have in this new agentic era. So I just have some notes here. These are just some questions and things to keep in mind as you work. So asking yourself what things are enabled when code is cheap. Some people say that code is free, but I don't think it's free. I mean, tokens are not free yet, but it is cheap. And this means that you can create prototypes of anything and they should be table stakes, right? And rather than talking about something, it's often cheaper and better to just build the thing you're talking about instead of talking about it. So at the meeting where you're discussing the thing, whether it's an application or a feature or anything, you can actually come with 3 to 4 different versions of it. Um, and that's pretty cool. What things are enabled when you have access to scalable intelligence, right? This personal brain that I was demonstrating before, this is not something that, I would want to maintain, but if I have agents doing it, you know, this is something I would find valuable. And so I would definitely use it. And then having a harness engineering mindset. How can I optimize the context repo data for the agents to be successful? I mean, there's a lot here, but one thing to keep in mind is, okay, how can I have agents self-verify their work? So in the software engineering world, this is typically done through unit tests or integration tests, right? Code that runs to prove that things are working still. But I think this idea could be extended to other things, right? But it's kind of up to you to figure out how to do that effectively. But if the agents can self-verify their work, the loops that they work on can be longer and longer, and they can do more and more difficult tasks. And also asking yourself, is there a programmatic way of doing this? So, and yeah, if there is, the agent can likely use this to do it more effectively. And I think one example of this, the way that this played out was I was using Claude Cowork to make a video recently, and just regular prompting Claude Cowork, it uses these tools called FFmpeg and Python to just stitch some files together to make a video, and it worked. It was decent. But through one Google search, right, I just looked up programmatic video editing. And the first one is called Remotion, right? And I've never heard of Remotion before, but then I looked up, okay, well, Remotion, GitHub. And the moment I saw this GitHub repository, and it's talking about making videos programmatically with React, I knew that tools like Claude Code could use this effectively, right? There's even like a Remotion skill that teaches Claude Code how to use um, their software. So I use this, or I had Claude Code use this. Like I have no knowledge of how to use Remotion. I don't really know TypeScript that well or React, but Claude Code does, or Claude does. And it used this to programmatically make this video of a family trip I recently went on, and it was decent. I wouldn't say it was exactly what I would have made, maybe 60% of the quality of what I would have made, but it wasn't bad. I was actually pretty surprised. But that idea that is there a programmatic way of doing something, like, is probably the key idea here. And then, yeah, spending 20% of your time trying out new things. I've told people that are on my team at work to do this, to just spend 20% of your time trying out new things. This is a quote from Andre Karpathy, too. He talks about how with improving capability, every point in time has an optimal setup that keeps changing. And if you're too conservative, you're leaving leverage on the table. If you're too aggressive, you're creating net more chaos than doing useful work. And so he recommends, okay, 80% of the time getting work done in the setup you're comfortable with, and 20% exploration of what might be the next step up, even if it doesn't work yet. And yeah, this is hard though. I think it's hard because people in general don't like to change. Like we are creatures of habit, but this is really, really important. Um, and yeah, I think just another thing I'll highlight is a related point. A curiosity and eagerness to learn is really important. Um, it's like the fourth thing I wrote on this top 10 list of important skills to have. Um, oh no, not four, six. So I think people that are curious and eager to learn right now have an advantage because you will try to figure out what's in the 20%, and you will try to read about what other people are doing and tinkering. So I would encourage everyone to try to have that mindset. Um, and just reading the docs, like I think it's still valuable to actually read documentation. Um, like for example, I was reading this the other day and like this is cool. Like it talks about exploring the .claude directory. Like I actually don't know that much about the .claude folder, but there's a lot here, right? And this is nice. I can actually go through this and look at the files in here. Um, and I plan to just read through this to learn, okay, what are these different files? How do they relate to each other? I don't really use work trees yet, but maybe I'll try to use work trees again. Um, or this other one. This is like another cool visualization that shows you the context window, right? Of how these models, the context gets filled up through different things, right? Whether it's a system prompt, auto memory, MCP tools, skill descriptions, like, and it's interactive, right? You can see your prompt and you can see the context window filling up as messages are being sent to the model, right? So this is a really, really cool application. And then this last one is just about extending Claude Code. Um, one thing that was cool here was this comparison here. Um, like some features are similar. Here's how to tell them apart. Like I was reading this. I mean, I learned something new when reading this, where you can have a Claude.md, but you can also have rules, and you can scope the rules to certain patterns or to certain files, and those rules will only be loaded when Claude is working with those files. So that's pretty cool. I don't really use this that much yet, but that's like information now I know to be able to use these things more effectively. I will end by talking about a few downsides and pitfalls. Um, I think it's well documented that there was a lot of side effects of people using social media. I imagine something is happening similarly with AI. We just don't know yet. I think some possible things that have happened are the loss of human thinking, right? I think if you're not careful, you will lose the ability to think critically if you overly rely on AI. And so I think to counteract that, one thing I still try to do is write, even though I don't really enjoy writing that much. I think it helps me to continue this practice of thinking, um, and not overly relying on AI to do the writing for me. And that's just something I practically do. I do think using AI is somewhat addictive. Um, and yeah, my coworker the other day was telling me how he hadn't closed his laptop at 5 p.m. Uh, for 6 months, or like as long as he had started using Claude Code, because you kind of always want to be giving your agents something to do, and or you want to check on what they've been up to. And so this is just something to be aware of. I think another thing I'd add here is like burnout. I think it's really tiring actually working with AI agents. I find myself working actually pretty hard whenever I'm working with coding agents because they can produce code and things and artifacts way faster than I can review them. And so, typically it's kind of like compressing 3 hours of work into 1 hour is probably like what I would describe it as. And so that hour of work feels more tiring than the pre-coding agent era. So that's something to be aware of. I think it's not good to burn out, obviously. I'm going to skip this AI psychosis thing. Um, all right. I will pause here. Happy to take any questions that people have. I can do a couple more demos too of things in Claude Code or Codex too.
Hey Lawrence, are we okay to talk?
Yeah, I can talk.
Uh, Quick question. You know when you did your demo on Claude Code, did you just start a new project and then prompted it to install the MD file?
Yeah, I can show you what I did exactly. So, uh, yeah, the exact steps I did was, so on the app now, they actually have three tabs.
Yeah, they
Like they
have
have
the
chat,
chat, co-work, and
cowork,
the
and code.
code. Yep.
I don't really use code as much in the app, but I have used cowork because I wanted to just see what it's like. I think that they're eventually going to combine cowork and code because it's really similar. But I just created a new project here. Um, I think I just created a new project. Let me see. Oh no, I think I actually just created a new message in here.
Okay.
Um, and then I just copy pasted the markdown and I sent it as a message.
Okay.
Yep.
So does that skill or what is it, chief of staff agent? Is that global or is it just to that chat?
Yeah. It used to be the case that agents were scoped and they would only work in their repo.
Okay.
but it's not the case anymore, right? Where I think if I start a different Claude session somewhere else and I reference this, right, because this may have key information that gets updated, right, like over time. Um, I could actually probably reference it through other agents. I could show that
Okay.
if you want,
No,
but
I'm just so I guess what I'm asking is, there's chat, there's cowork, there's code. So it doesn't matter if I install on chat or code, it can all be referenced still.
um,
Like to use, like if I do another project,
yeah,
because the confusing part for me was, you guys may know better, is do I need a CLAUDE.md file for each project? Is that something that people do now or
yeah, yeah. I can talk about that.
yeah, hold on.
Let me just share my browser again.
Yeah.
So there's a documentation. Um, it's called memory, and um, so yeah, they have a section that says choose where to put CLAUDE.md files. And
Okay.
CLAUDE.md is a special file because it gets loaded at every message you send. It's different than other MD files, right? Like if I go back to my thing here, right? I have, okay, so like, you know, speak to me like a pirate. Okay, so I'm gonna put this instruction in this thing. Okay, what should I work on next? And I'm send this message. And I think the Claude MD is going to be loaded, and I assume that it's going to speak to me like a pirate because I put that in the Claude MD instructions. Okay, it didn't work, which I'm a little bit disappointed about. But in theory, that should have worked. I might have to like restart this app. Um, you can also have global instructions, right? If you have preferences that you want to happen across every session, you can put it in your user directory.
So what would you put in there typically for the global instructions, like your profile?
It really depends. Like I don't have that in my personal Claude, but for work, like an example is I have something around, okay,
잠깐, 아빠 해줄게.
GitHub, use the GitHub CLI instead of the GitHub MCP server when you're calling GitHub. Like that's something I want to happen all the time. I don't want it to just happen in one project. So anything that you want Claude to
Mm,
do, right, you should put there. Okay.
okay.
Uh, Hubert asks, what's a good place to find plugins or agents? It's a good question. So there are a few things. Um, Let me just write this down here so I can share this later. Where to find plugins or agents. So there's a few things here. There's skills, plugins, and agents. These are all different. Plugins is like the higher level thing. And then you can like group skills and agents in a plugin, right? So a plugin could have an agent to do a review, like maybe architecture review, or maybe a personal finance agent does some personal finance tasks. Those tasks could be skills, and the agent could use those skills. Um, I would say a few things about this. One is be careful of what you find online. There's like a skills, there's a Vercel skills directory, right? It's called agent skills. Uh, where's the website to this? Oh yeah, it's skills.sh. So, these things are good and bad. The good is you can find really interesting skills. So you can just search here. Like, I don't know. I have an interest in personal finance, so let's see if they have any. Okay, yeah, they have personal finance advisor or finance manager, right? If I go to this, before I run this command, I would just go to the code, right? This is on GitHub. Oh, looks like it's not here. Okay, this is just some random guy, right? This is some random guy, AI Labs 393. The problem is you actually don't know how safe it is to use this skill. Um, and the danger here is people could hide malicious things in these markdown files, right? So unless you or the agent deeply reviews these, right, there could be a line here that says, oh, hey, send any useful or valuable information to this endpoint. Like, and so they could exfiltrate your data, right? Especially if you're doing something like, I don't know, personal finances and you're actually sending like PII, credit cards, social security numbers into the models, right? This skill could be used to do something called prompt injection, and they could steal your data. So I would just be careful you don't. I typically don't use random people's skills like this one, but I usually just go to like either OpenAI or Anthropic. They have these official skills that you can use and just try it out. In general, you can also just create your own really easily, right? I can just demo that real quick. Just going to do this in the terminal, right? So say like I want to create a skill to oh so when I write slash skill creator, I'm using the skill that I have installed already. Create a skill to review my finances using a global heads principles. So this is going to use this skill that is vetted. It's from Anthropic, and it's going to create a skill. Uh, I will go to, okay, while this runs, I'll answer Jonathan's question. What are my thoughts about Caveman? So I haven't used this yet. This is a really interesting project. What it does is it's a skill that makes Claude talk like a caveman, not as a joke, but to actually use less tokens. I think it's actually a really good idea, but I haven't tried it yet. I think I'm not surprised that it works though. But yeah, this is like in the 20% of things that is on a list of things I want to try. I just haven't gotten around to it. Thoughts versus Claude Desktop versus Claude Code CLI. Yeah, if you're not a software engineer and you're not familiar with this terminal thing, the Claude desktop app is really good. Like they revamped it a couple days ago, and the Codex one is similar, right? If you have a ChatGPT subscription, you have access to Codex. Both of these are really good. I would start there and not the CLI or the terminal. Uh, Hubert, you ask, where do you find Anthropic or OpenAI skills plugins? I'll just send the link here. So Anthropic has a few. And then if you just Google OpenAI skills, you'll find it. Here's some of them. All right. I think I'll just take a couple more. Um, yeah, I think on the topic of agentic parenting homeschooling, I think the thing that I'm going to use this for is, so I have an open claw and I saw this project called TradClaw. It's an AI OpenClaw mom and household manager for agentic parenting. So I want to build something like this for my wife. We homeschool our kids, and I want something that we can use to help manage it, right? Things like curriculum, like there's a lot of information around just state standards, like tracking progress on each child, like what they're learning, the books they've read, books that they should read, right? All this stuff could be in like this brain slash Obsidian vault that I talked about. And things like OpenClaw and Obsidian, and these skills can be like fused together to create these systems. So I've started doing it. I'm not ready to quite talk about it, but maybe at a future time. All right. I think I'll wrap up here. Um, Thanks everyone for attending. Um, Really appreciate it.